NFL Live, we have got a packed hour ahead. The wide receiver market has been reset again, a record deal agreed to between Jackson Smith and Jigba and Seattle. We'll talk about that. And Notre Dame's Pro Day. Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, two of the top running backs in this class. Field Yates tells us why we might see an all-time NFL draft first there. Plus, linebacker Levante David for the Bucs, 14 seasons in Tampa. He calls it a career, but he joins us around the corner. We've got a stacked hour ahead. Field Yates,
we're here.
Mel Kiper Jr., Tim Hasselbeck, Phil Murphy. Adjust your fantasy lineups accordingly. And the thing is, Field, that the sport has no off season. We're going to be heating up just between your last two mock drafts. We had what? Opening of free agency, blockbuster NFL trade. Denver doesn't have a first-round pick anymore. And things are only going to heat up over the next month. We are 30 days from the opening of the NFL draft in Pittsburgh. And to celebrate the big 3-0, we got a man who looks like he's in his 20s.
I will take that, Phil. You have been promoted. I'm not sure to what, but congratulations.
Field Yates released his new two-round mock today, an early pick that jumps out, rather. Notre Dame running back Jeremiah Love falling to the Commanders at pick 7. And I say falling too because he's number 2 on Field's big board. And per Bill Connolly, Love's Irish will rank number 1 in returning production for 2026. Ton of outbound talent too. They're bench pressing, they're jumping, they're running. NFL scouts are all posted up in South Bend today for Notre Dame's Pro Day. Field, let's start, though, with Jeremiah Love. And I mentioned it. He's number 2 on your big board. Available to Washington at 7. Take us through the thought process of how that happened.
Yeah, the question that Tennessee at number 4 and the Giants at number 5 has to ask themselves is how much are they going to value positional value? When you think about teams that have won in the NFL at the highest level in recent years, the Seahawks just won the Super Bowl with Kenneth Walker III, a second-round pick, playing in the final year of his rookie contract. They then had Kenneth Walker III depart in free agency. Does Tennessee or do the Giants feel like they are far enough along in their roster building process they're going to use a premium pick on a player that plays a non-premium position? Meanwhile, the Commanders at number 7, who this offseason have really beefed up their pass rush, specifically with the additions of Odafe Owe and also Kayvon Chason, can say to themselves, 2 years ago, we were playing in Philadelphia for a shot to go to the Super Bowl, Phil. You pair Jeremiah Love, clearly the most explosive player in this class, with Jaden Daniels in an offense that last season really got stuck in the mud, in part because Jaden Daniels was not fully available for this team, would all of a sudden have a chance to become a strength once again. I think every team in the NFC East feels like the division is a little bit more winnable. I think the Eagles, Commanders, Cowboys should feel going into the year like this division has a chance to be theirs for the taking. Jeremiah Love would certainly help this Washington offense.
Jody heard me talk about the field of the offensive line and the wide receivers and the tight ends and all the positions. And we talk about, hey, where could teams go, right? Don't take a running back in the first round. You take a running back who can catch the football in the slot or wide, who's multidimensional over everybody else. So that running back philosophy goes by the boards when you got a Jeremiah Love. I watched this kid throughout his career at Notre Dame. He doesn't fumble the ball. He is a fear factor player, and that's something Jaden Daniels will have next to him, and that will be something defenses really have to worry about. So you can talk about all the other positions, say, hey, Kiper, you said go that route. Don't take the running back. This kid is special, and you'll talk about the game-breaking ability he has as a runner, how dependable, reliable he is, and how multi-talented he is. For the Commanders, Adam Peters, where was he? He was with the 49ers. They had Christian McCaffrey, right? Now you bring Jeremiah Love to Washington with Jaden Daniels looking to revert back to that rookie form when he almost had him in the Super Bowl, right? Jeremiah Love is much more than just a running back. He is a big-time offensive talent and a fear factor player.
And Tim, if you look at the teams picking ahead of Washington, right? If you're picking in the top 6, you got a few needs. Do you think Love will be available for Washington at 7, or will he go earlier?
I think there's a decent chance he goes earlier. You mentioned the Titans at 4 and the Giants at 5. You know, certainly teams that, when you look at them, could they go other positions? Sure, they could. But I think you also look at those teams and you say they have a young quarterback. And so, one of the ways, you can try to help your young quarterback is, you can build the offensive line. Sure, you can do that. But how about get him a running back? And to Mel's point, not just a guy that you can only use one, way. I think if you find a running back that is in the, the caliber of Saquon or Bijan, guys like that, or Christian McCaffrey, where you go, wait a second, we can have this guy touch the ball over 20 times in a game. Nothing helps a quarterback as much as that helps a quarterback. And so I could see, at a position that's been, quote unquote, devalued in the National Football League, I could see Love going that early because of the impact a rookie running back can have on an offense, just based on the volume in terms of touches and impact that he can have on an offense.
And for all the great two-headed college running back systems we've seen, Darren McFadden, Felix Jones, Cadillac, Williams, Ronnie Brown, hell, Pony Express at SMU. Never before in the Common Draft era has one university had two running backs going RB1, RB2 in a given draft. We'll debate Love and Price, but the price you have, Notre Dame, could be the first.
Yeah, this sounds like we're about to see some history on April 23rd and 24th, most likely.
It's a big day for Fields, both Yates with his latest mock, and on campus, college football field, pro days. Notre Dame, Texas, Louisville, Auburn, 9 of them across college football today. Big-time programs all over Fields' latest mock. And among them, the Plains. Big-time programs there. What more, Field, can you tell us about Auburn edge rusher Keldrick Faulk?
He came into the season, Phil, thinking he could be a top 5 overall pick in the draft. He's 6'7". He's 276 pounds. He's got great arm length. He checks all the boxes in terms of physical measurables. But he had just 2 sacks this past season after 7 as a true sophomore back in 2024. Now he's got some positional versatility. He can play on the end. He can play lined up over the center. Those big arms get in the way of passing lanes. That being said, you watched the tape last year and you're saying to yourself consistently, we want more. We never really got it out of him.
Mel, Field mentioned it. This kid's the size of a small forward. Weighs 276 with positional versatility. Do you like Faulk to San Francisco at 27 where Field has him mocked?
At that point, you got to like the pick. You're basically betting on the talent. You're taking that leap of faith that this talent's going to shine through once he's coached up in the NFL. He's a great young man. Field talked about his versatility. I tell you, he backs passes down. He didn't get the sacks. He didn't get the pressures that he had in 2024 where he was productive. 24, Tyron Crawford was a better player this year for Auburn in terms of production across the board, right? But that's your ultimate LTP or Keldrick Faulk. He looks the part. There's not a defensive line coach in the NFL isn't going to look at that young man and say, I can get him to 10-plus sacks in the NFL. So for Keldrick Faulk, if he does get down that far, the only reason is the lack of great production. Because going into the season back in August, we thought he'd be a top 5, top 10 pick guaranteed.
And Mel, if you're talking upside, assessing upside, age matters. And Faulk doesn't turn 21 until September.
Great point.
Let's head up I-65 to Louisville. Wideout Chris Bell's pro day already underway. Field, late season ACL tear for Bell. Where do you see him landing?
Tricky player to place because of that ACL tear, but I have him going in the second round of the Los Angeles Rams. He's 6'2", 222 pounds. Keep in mind, for the Rams, they got Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. So they need a wide receiver to win meaningfully this year? They do not. But if any team can afford to be patient with the player, with this kind of upside, it will be the Rams. Worth noting that on the day that we found out that Chris Bell tore his ACL, I had a mock that dropped. He was picked 32 at the time of the Denver Broncos. Big-time talent. The Rams get a discount here.
So, Tim, you played quarterback in this league. With LA's team needs and what Bell does, do you like the Rams going wide receiver toward the back end of round 2?
Well, I do think, Field brings up a good point in terms of, the value, not needing him, immediately. So it is, I think when you get to picks 22 and beyond, you're kind of talking about luxury areas for teams that are good, which the Rams certainly are. So, and then when you look at just the investment at the wide receiver position that you have currently at the Rams, nobody there that's on their roster was a high round draft pick at the receiver position. So I do think that you need to go in cycles where you need to start investing higher picks at certain positions where you've maybe just outpaced the market with getting Puka in the 5th round, signing an older veteran player like Devontae Adams. So I don't hate the idea because the need's not immediate, but at the same time you get the value and eventually you are going to have to invest in the position.
Yeah, and if the knee's healthy at 6'2", 222, more than 17 yards per catch as a junior, at worst, that is enviable depth that Matt Stafford won't mind having. Never a bad reason to head to Austin. Texas also holding its pro day today. Field, linebacker Anthony Hill. Where do you have him landing?
41st overall, the Cincinnati Bengals, who desperately need linebacker help. 17 sacks, 7 forced fumbles over 3 seasons for Anthony Hill. An explosive athlete. The biggest question mark, is he more athlete, or is he sort of this football processor, like a guy like C.J. Allen out of Georgia, who had going 7 picks prior to this, But you cannot deny the production. He came into this past season with hopes of being a first-round pick. Not sure he gets there, but definitely a player that would help address what I believe is a desperate need for the Bengals still after a busy offseason.
And Field, you have him going 41st overall, so it's not entirely out of that first-round window, right? 9 picks after that. Mel, year 2 with Al Golden at D.C. and Cincy. Do you agree with Field? Bengals going linebacker here?
Defense. They got to go defense. I don't know about the position. I disagree with Field. I think their off-ball linebackers have some talent, those young kids, and they got better as the year went along. Anthony Hill Jr. is a talented football player. I think when you look at late first round, it's in play for Anthony Hill Jr. He gets down this far, sure, he's worth consideration, but so will be safety and the defensive line, edge rusher, all those areas the Bengals need to upgrade. When I think they will think their field, they're okay at off-ball linebacker going into this draft.
Yeah, but it's for Cincinnati's defense, it's been more embarrassment than embarrassment of riches. You got a linebacker, 4.51, 47 forced fumbles in 3 seasons. Not a lot of defensive coordinators would turn that one down. New on NFL Live, new Falcons QB Tua Tagovailoa met with the media today for the first time since he moved to Atlanta.
Last year wasn't the best year for me, and I'm looking for a fresh start, but fresh start in the sense of being able to compete, being able to go back out there and playing good football, and I think the best football is still ahead of me. You got Yak and Kyle Pitts. You can throw it in the vicinity of Drake. Drake's going to catch it. You got a back like Bijan, and you got the play-action game to work off of that to get these guys the ball. All in all, I think it can be really dangerous.
So it's Michael Penix and Tua leading that Falcons QB room. Tim, on paper, you see the rationale. Lefty QB1, lefty QB2. How do you like the fit for Tua in Atlanta?
For Tua, I think it's great. I mean, you find yourself in a situation where, the starter hasn't been able to stay healthy. And so while it didn't work in Miami, you've got another crack at being a starting quarterback in the NFL, a real shot at it. So I think from Tua's perspective, offensive fit, the guys around him that he just referenced, I think it's a great situation for any quarterback. That's why I think I'm a little bit surprised from the Falcons' perspective that they were so eager to sign Tua when there are going to be other quarterbacks that were available, that if it wasn't going to work out with Penix for whatever reason, injury or otherwise, that opportunity was a great opportunity in Atlanta. So, certainly referencing somebody like, Kyler, certainly, other quarterbacks, veteran quarterbacks, maybe guys on the trade market. So it was surprising to me from Atlanta's perspective. I think it's outstanding and very fortunate for Tua.
Yeah, I would say this, Tim. I'm not totally surprised by him ending up in Atlanta for a couple of reasons. First of all, the finances of this made this one of those situations where a lot of teams were going to at least have a conversation about it. You're getting him for just over $1 million. That is, by quarterback standards, a complete bargain. And in Atlanta, while it's not a carbon copy of the offense that he played in Miami under Mike McDaniel, there are at least some elements that we saw under Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland that might be translatable for Tua. So is he an answer that I think can be the long-term one for the Falcons? I don't. I still think the more likely long-term answer for them is Michael Penix Jr. The team still has great optimism for him. But for a $1.2 million roll of the dice, I'm okay with it given the quarterback landscape Atlanta had to operate within this offseason, understanding their cap situation and the fact that it was just not a great quarterback market.
And the last team to start multiple left-handed quarterbacks in the same season. Got to go back to the 1997 Jags. They did go 11-5 with Mark Brunell and Steve Matthews. Lost in the wild card round. Bucs linebacker Levante David has announced his retirement from the NFL after 14 seasons. David stayed in Tampa his entire career, still covered a ton of ground. 1,714 tackles. Only Bobby Wagner has more since David entered the league in 2012. David tied Derek Brooks, there's a name, for most tackles in Bucs history in Week 18 last season. He had 6 tackles and a fumble recovery and a 2-point home win. And it's not just empty calories on these stats. David's a game changer. One of 3 players with 40 career sacks, 10 picks, 20 fumbles recovered. The other 2, Hall of Famers Ray Lewis and Julius Peppers. And David has the most tackles in Bucs history, mentioned 3 seasons. of 40 sacks. A terrific career in Tampa, and he joins us now on NFL Live. We welcome in now former Bucs linebacker Lavonte David, fresh into NFL retirement. Lavonte, when you hear the company you kept in Tampa, Derek Brooks, or all time, Julius Peppers, Ray freaking Lewis, those stats, that company, what does that mean to you?
Oh, man, it's incredible. The journey I've been on, the path that I've been on, never thought I'd be in the same, atmosphere of those names, but to be able to accomplish that, I'm grateful and I'm honored, man. And I have a ton of respect for those guys. So, obviously, I'm a fan of Derrick Brooks. I'm a fan of Ray Lewis. For my name to be mentioned with those guys, man, it's incredible. It's something that I don't take for granted. I'm thankful, and I'm glad what the game has brought towards me.
And with still a very productive 2025 for you, how did you assess the tipping point to say, okay, the career's in the books, time to go to the next chapter, and what do you have planned next?
I believe it's just a mentality thing, man. I played football, since I was 6 years old, and every year I had a mentality to just go out there and just, play the game and dominate and, have fun with it. But once the season ended, that kind of mentality kind of like left me. It kind of like just me thinking to myself, okay, do I really, want to continue playing football or, just figure out what's next in my life? You got my whole life is ahead of me, and I'm just looking forward to the next, challenge and, finding my next passion. And, I bought myself enough time to be able to, figure that out. But, I feel like, good things gonna be ahead.
In the 2012 draft, you heard your name called in round 2. Barely had to change the shade of red, going from Nebraska to Tampa. Right. You put on that Bucs hat, and you never take it off. You're with one career your entire time. What does it mean to you to have all pros, plural, a Super Bowl ring, and do it with the same franchise for 14 years?
Man, I think it was destiny. I always said, God had a plan for me, and I just stuck with the plan, and He put me in this place. Going from Miami and going up to, the Midwest to, Kansas and then Nebraska, being away from home, being out of Florida for the first time, God had a plan for me, and I just stuck with that plan, and He was able to bless me to be able to come back to the state of Florida and finish my whole career here, play 14 years here. You know what I'm saying? It's been an incredible journey, incredible time for me, starting at Fort Scott Community College, then making my way through Nebraska, and now here. Each level taught me different things about life and different things about football, and I'm grateful for it.
And you're able to win a Super Bowl in the state of Florida. Talking about that 2020 season, Tom Brady comes to town, you make the playoffs for the first time, win a Super Bowl on your home field. As a ninth-year vet at that point, what was that season like for you, seeing everything come together?
Man, when we first got the call that Tom was coming, it was crazy. The hype was amazing. Everybody had tremendous hype. We went from, to, laughed about and to, Super Bowl favorites or Super Bowl contenders. But, obviously then COVID happened and, we had to deal with that thing. But I think that brought us together as a team, and then, obviously, Tom leading the charge, for us to be able to, accomplish the goal after, kind of being down as a program in the past, whatever years, and be able to be at the top of the mountain was incredible. That's something I'm gonna brag about for a long time, and I'm thankful to be a part of that.
And it's fair to say that Super Bowl will be remembered. The season for Tom Brady in Tampa, but the Super Bowl remembered for the performance of you in that Bucs defense. And elsewhere in Tampa this offseason, Lavonte, somebody drafted very high, very early in your tenure there, changes teams for the first time. What's it going to be like for you to see longtime teammate Mike Evans in a 49ers uniform this season?
Yeah, it's gonna be different. It's gonna be kind of odd. But as always, man, me and Mike relationship goes beyond football. And no matter what, I had his back. When he told me, when I found out what was going on, I was just root the best for him. You know what I'm saying? Mike gonna be Mike, man. Mike gonna continue to dominate. Mike gonna continue to be the best receiver in this game. And most importantly, man, Mike gonna be the best person that you will ever meet. And I'm sure those guys gonna get a chance to taste that and see that. And kind of happy for those guys because they get a chance to see Mike. You know what I'm saying? They get a chance to really get to know him, and they get a chance to see what he brings to the game of football. But it's all love. No matter what, man. Mike is like a little brother to me. For me to be able to watch him grow and build him throughout his football journey, it was incredible to see.
All right, I got to ask because my calendar says March. You're beloved in Lincoln, Cornhusker through and through, but Nebraska no longer just a football school, not just a women's volleyball school. How are you feeling about the men's basketball team's success, getting its first ever tournament wins, and into the Sweet 16 this week?
I was shocked by it. I mean, not shocked, but I was amazed by it. You know, I'm happy for those guys, man. I seen those guys, you know, get a hot start at the beginning of the season, and for them to, you know, take it this far in the tourney so far, man, is incredible. You know, me being in Lincoln and understanding how important, you know, their sports is to those people, man. I know the whole community, the whole state of Nebraska is going crazy. When I watched their first round game, I seen the fans, how, you know, it seemed like a home game, and that's what you get out of Nebraska fans, man. That's why I love that place so much. And I'm rooting for those guys, man. I'm rooting for those guys. I'm sure they're going to make it far, and just to keep taking it one game at a time, man.
Well, you're beloved in Lincoln. You're beloved in Tampa. 14 years with the Bucks and a captain for 12 of them. That says what that locker room felt about you as much as anything. Levante, congratulations on an exceptional pro career, and all the best in retirement, man. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you. God bless.
Back here on NFL Live, reigning Offensive Player of the Year Jackson Smith-Njigba, as expected, got paid. Yesterday, he signed a 4-year, $168.6 million deal with over $120 million in guarantees. Ties him to Seattle through 2031. JSN will make over $42 million per year on this extension, nearly $2 million more than Jamar Chase for the highest ever by a wide receiver. The newly minted Super Bowl champ, the third wideout to average $35+ million a year, along with Chase and Justin Jefferson. All three of those deals signed in the last 2 years. So, Tim, as expected, a record deal, an expected record deal. How do you like Seattle getting this done and now?
I love it for Seattle. I think it's smart. It's why John Schneider is one of the best GMs in the game. Listen, you know JSN can play. And rather than, you know, taking a posture of saying, all right, you got another year left on your rookie deal, then you have the 5th-year option, and then we could franchise you if we really wanted to. And so, you know, there should be no urgency because we're talking about 3 years from now when you actually could become free. Rather than taking that posture, you know, Seattle's basically said, let's do an extension, make you the highest paid receiver in the game because we know you can play. We've got the ability to do it because we're not paying the top of the market for our quarterback, and it alleviates some of that stress. It spreads out the deal, you know, for a while, which is good for the club. And then it also gives, you know, Jackson Smith-Njigba another opportunity at free agency later in his career. So I think at every turn, this makes a ton of sense for a guy that's got 220 catches in the last 2 seasons with 2 different quarterbacks.
Yeah, I feel the Seattle offense, rings fresh on their fingers, still some retooling ahead. Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker is with the Chiefs. How do you see the Seahawks trying to fill that backfield void?
I want to make Mel happy right now, perhaps a little bit agitated, I should say, because Jadarian Price is who I had them taking at the end of the second round, 64th overall. Now he's 43 on the big board for me is Jadarian Price. He's a big physical runner. He can blaze the 40 time. He also is a threat as a kickoff return man. Had 3 returns for a touchdown this past season. The question for Jadarian Price is just 6 receptions last season for Notre Dame, playing behind Jeremiah Love. But he's got barely any tread on the tires because he was essentially a backup running back during his Notre Dame career. But after losing Kenneth Walker III, understanding that at some point Seattle will get Zach Charbonnet back this upcoming season, Jadarian Price to me will be a great value at the end of round 2.
Can you imagine, Field, where we would have projected Jadarian Price after the 2025 season had he gone back and performed like Jeremiah Love, anywhere close to that, improved on those receptions, don't fumble the football. With his running skills, boy, he attacks, he breaks tackles, he's got game-breaking speed. He is also a dynamic kickoff returner. Jadarian Price, Field, will not be there at 64. I don't think he's going to be there for Seattle at 64. If he were, it'd be a great pick. I just got to believe the second running back behind Love is Jadarian Price. And I got to think early to mid-second round, he comes off the board. At one point, I even thought maybe late first round for this kid, who, like I said, once he gets in the NFL, he'll catch the ball. And he will be also, like I said, a kickoff returner that you want because that's going to get you out to the 40, midfield, or even plus that territory. So when you look at Jadarian Price, where we say, hey, he's not multidimensional, that kick return ability is excellent. And as a pure runner, he has few peers.
And few peers in that per capita explosive play market. 21% of Price's carries went for 10 or more yards. third best of any running back in the nation last year. Field, let's dive a little deeper into your latest mock. Take us through the first few picks for the teams at the top, starting with the Raiders.
The only pick I can say with absolute certainty is the Raiders taking Fernando Mendoza, number 1 overall. The quarterback out of Indiana won the Heisman Trophy this past season. Clutch production, one of his friends, against top 10 teams this past season. 6 games, 15 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He had 3 separate games against top 10 ranked teams at the time, which completed 85% of his passes or more. He was excellent wire to wire for Indiana. They go to defense next, and that would be Ohio State's Caden McDonald. Big nose tackle would be an ideal fit for Rob Leonard, the new defensive coordinator for the Raiders. Interior defensive line, an area to address. Let's go to the Jets, Jets, who got 4 letters in their name. They also have 4 picks in the top 44. They start with David Bailey, number 2 overall, going with a pass rusher out of Texas Tech, who had 14.5 sacks this past season. No player had more in the FBS. 16, they grabbed Mekhi Lemon, the Biletnikoff winner out of USC. He plays much bigger than his stature. He is an absolute maven with the football after the catch. 2 players in round 2, Colton Hood from Tennessee, and also Kristen Miller, defensive tackle from Georgia. Finally, the Cardinals, a little bit of a splash, not just at number 3 overall, where they get Arvell Reese from Ohio State. Plenty of upside for this green and raw pass rusher, but he had a pressure rate of nearly 20% last season on the 97 pass rushing snaps he had. They also make a move to trade up for former Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson. Number 26 overall is where I have him landing in this mock. This would be like the Giants last year. Pass rusher early, quarterback later in round 1. I will be boots on the ground, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, tomorrow for Ty Simpson's pro day. Clearly the second best quarterback in this year's draft.
Need to give you a chance to exhale as you look at the Cardinals' depth chart. 33-year-old Jacoby Brissett back, started 12 games last year. They also brought in Gardner Minshew in free agency. Tim, how do you feel about Fields' proposed trade? Not dissimilar, like you said, to what the Giants did, getting back in the first round to get Jackson Dart. Yeah. Ty Simpson to the Cardinals here at 26?
Look, I do think Simpson makes sense as a first rounder. I also wouldn't be completely shocked if he were, to fall out of the first round. So I just would say that if you're a team that looks at him and thinks, yeah, he can be a starter in this league, and so it makes sense for us to move back into the first round, so to have that 5th-year option on a quarterback when, depending on where you go, let's say Arizona in this case, maybe you're not the starter this season. Maybe you're not the starter for the first half of the season. Who knows what it is? But in that, scenario, I think you need to have the 5th year to really know if you have your quarterback or not. So I think it makes sense. I do think there's a lot to like about Ty Simpson. I think, look, he's been coached well to play the position. I think he's got a lot of really, really good film, in terms of how it relates to the amount of the sample size that you have of him as a starter. I think he's a better athlete than people would think that he would be. He just doesn't, necessarily possess some of the things that you look for, in guys that typically go in the first half of the first round, which is just, taller, bigger, more physically talented, bigger sample size, things that, give you more confidence that it is going to work out and work out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and Tim, the number of starts has become a hot button topic of late. And, there are people that believe, and I understand this angle, that it's about evaluating whatever you have on tape. There's a lot of good that you see from Ty Simpson, but the larger the sample size, Tim, one of the other dynamics that comes into play is that the more a player has played, the more you understand what the real limitations are that might not show up in that small 15 college starts sample size. But of note here for Arizona, and why I believe this team can feel some level of confidence that they can strategically navigate the board in the first round, is that unlike most other positions on the roster, there's only a finite number of teams that are realistically going to be looking for a quarterback this early in the draft. We're talking about, obviously, Arizona, maybe Pittsburgh, maybe the New York Jets, maybe a team like the Miami Dolphins, although I am skeptical after the Malik Willis signing, maybe the Cleveland Browns. So it allows you to say, we got to get to this spot to have a pretty good chance to land the player that we believe in.
Yeah, and Field, I think you bring up an amazing point about the number of starts, right? Bill Parcells had his commandments. I think he wanted 45 starts or something like that, in his commandments. But yeah, and so we're not seeing that now. But I do like, and I would ask you if you think that when you just look at Anthony Richardson, you look at Trey Lance, you look at, even go back further, Mark Sanchez, or, I'm just curious is the feedback on it, because I would argue that it's just a guess when you don't have the number of starts in the data. Like, nobody knows. You might get it right. Ryan Tannehill, I think, had 17 starts. Yeah. It worked out. He ended up being a great player. But you don't know if you don't have that information.
That's my biggest thing, Tim, is I hear, I get it. We can only work with what we have. But when you have 35 starts like Fernando Mendoza, it's not just the stuff that we like that we have seen on tape, it's the stuff that we know by now. Like, these are the limitations for Fernando Mendoza. He's got to find a way to improve his in-pocket sort of awareness and not take as many sacks, even though he improved in that category this past season. For Ty Simpson, if he plays 30 games, there might be things that really haven't reared themselves up to this point that we would understand. We'd have to navigate at the next level. I think he's a really good player. He is inside my top 32 for prospects. He just is a trickier evaluation than a guy like Fernando, because wire to wire last season, Fernando Mendoza and Indiana dominated the college football landscape. Not just the teams early in the schedule who they should have beaten. The teams late in the season that have been traditional powerhouses during the college football playoff era, Indiana took down all of them.
And if you're a team like Arizona taking a quarterback who you feel you may have to develop, only 15 college starts, a realistic assessment about where you stand in a very deep FC West, you wouldn't imagine there's going to be an urge to rush him up the depth chart. You have if they're all called Ask Field, self-explanatory. Tim Hasselbeck, kick us off.
Field, it seems like every year, there's a team that surprises us that drafts a quarterback. Who is that team going to be this year?
I guess there isn't really a totally perfect answer here for a team. Hey, there we go. I was just trying to find my camera right there. So the Rams could be a team that could make take a quarterback there at some point. But the Cleveland Browns are a team that I think hasn't been discussed as much in the Ty Simpson of it all, right? They own pick 6 and 24. I know Mel would say, you're crazy. They've got Shedeur Sanders. They also have at least some level of expectation that Deshaun Watson could compete for that starting job this year, plus Dylan Gabriel. But I would not be surprised if Cleveland goes shopping once again at the quarterback market. New offensive-minded head coach in Todd Monken. We'll see how things shake out. But Cleveland is a team that I have earmarked who has at least been studying quarterbacks throughout this past college football season.
Field, I have one for you. Often questions in this draft and topics are about the lack of clear blue-chip talent. Teams in the top 10 who want to trade out. You need a dance partner.
Sure do.
Who realistically could we see make a splash Thursday night opening of the draft and trade into the top 10?
Well, I want to give a team that doesn't get much attention on our network some shine. It's the Dallas Cowboys, who own, of course, picks 12 and 20 in this year's first round. And if there is a scenario in which some of these top edge rushers are flying off the board early, the Dallas Cowboys might be sitting there at pick 12 and saying, we need to get one of those guys. What the Cowboys want to see is players like Francis Mauigoa and Spencer Fano, offensive linemen, going early in the order, because that pushes down some of these great edge rushers. They need to continue to add juice there, and there is, to me, a little bit of a gap that could occur prior to the Cowboys getting on the clock at number 12. So while the team has already moved some capital around to acquire a player like Rashawn Gary, 12 and 20 gives you some flexibility to move up if you'd like.
And a new defensive coordinator getting the keys in Dallas. You wonder how much autonomy he'll have in the room. You're the man affectionately known as Mel Kiper Jr.
Correct.
Let's go to Mel Kiper Jr. Sr. for one more Ask Field.
Young fielding. The Saints have a franchise quarterback, it looks like, in Tyler Shuck, but a major needed wide receiver. No wide out at 8, no wide out even in the early second round. Explain.
First of all, Mel, I'm following your lead here. You got to take the players that are in line with where your board has them. So I give him Ruben Bain Jr. because they do need a pass rusher. We'll see what happens with Cam Jordan. But as of right now, not under contract for next year. They need players to continue to build out that edge rushing group. Beyond that, as you know, Mel, deepest position in the draft, what? Wide receiver. I've got 42, that's right, 42 wide receivers with a draftable grade in this upcoming class. The Saints may not necessarily need to poach one in the top 42 selections. That's their first and second round pick as of right now, because they can get a good player at the top of round 3 or even somewhere going into day 3. Wide receiver and tight end this year are like running back and defensive tackle last year.
You have Carnell Tate going inside that Saints first selection. If he slips down to 8, we'll see if the calculus changes. That's what's so interesting about this draft season.